Dr. Sarah Chen pressed her gloved hand against the ice-cold metal of the crashed vessel, her breath forming small clouds in the frigid air of Kepler 442b. The ship was unlike anything in the galactic database. Its hull seemed to shimmer with an organic quality that made her scanner readings fluctuate wildly. 3 days had passed since the massive object had carved a burning path through the planet's atmosphere, and Sarah was the only xenobiologist brave enough to investigate alone. The mining colony of Haven's Rest had been buzzing with rumors. Some claimed it was a Zephyrian warship, others insisted it belonged to the mysterious void hunters that haunted the Outer Rim. But Sarah's instruments told a different story. The energy signatures were biological in nature, pulsing with a rhythm that reminded her of a heartbeat. As she circled the 200-meter-long vessel, Sarah noticed something that made her stop dead in her tracks. A section of the hull had been torn open, revealing glimpses of what lay within. But it wasn't machinery or corridors she saw. It was scales. Massive, iridescent scales that caught the pale light of Kepler's twin suns and threw it back in brilliant flashes of emerald and gold. Sarah's hands trembled as she activated her recording device. Personal log. Day 3 of investigation. The crashed vessel appears to be alive. I'm detecting massive life signs from within, though they're growing weaker by the hour. She paused, steadying herself against the alien hull. I'm going in. The breach in the ship's side was large enough for her to squeeze through, though she had to climb over twisted metal that looked more like broken bones than hull plating. Inside, the air was thick and humid, carrying a scent that reminded her of ozone and something else. Something ancient and powerful. The interior defied logic. Instead of decks and bulkheads, organic corridors stretched into darkness, their walls pulsing with bioluminescent veins. Sarah followed the strongest life sign readings deeper into the vessel, her portable lights casting dancing shadows on surfaces that seemed to breathe. Then she found him. The creature lay sprawled across what might have been a command center, though it looked more like the inside of a massive ribcage. He was magnificent and terrible, easily 40 feet from nose to tail, with wings that spanned nearly twice that when fully extended. His scales shifted color with each labored breath, cycling through deep purples and burning oranges before settling on a sickly gray-green. Sarah had studied every known species in the galaxy, but this creature belonged to no classification she recognized. His head was elongated and elegant, with intelligent eyes that tracked her movement despite his obvious pain. 4 limbs ended in claws that could have easily torn through starship armor. Yet when he looked at her, there was no aggression in his gaze, only curiosity, and something that looked remarkably like hope. "Hello," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible in the vast chamber. "I'm here to help." The dragon, for that's what he undeniably was, despite the impossibility of it, lifted his great head slightly. When he spoke, his voice resonated through the chamber like distant thunder, but somehow she understood every word. "You are not of my kind," he said, each word carefully measured. "Yet you offer aid. Why?" Sarah stepped closer, her scanner revealing the extent of his injuries. Multiple fractures along his left wing, severe internal bleeding, and what appeared to be some kind of energy burn across his flank. "Because you're hurt, and I'm a doctor. It's what I do." The dragon's eyes widened slightly. In all his centuries of existence, few beings had approached him without fear or greed in their hearts. This small human female radiated something he had rarely encountered: genuine compassion. "I am Thyraxton of the Eternal Flame," he said formally, "last of the star dragons of Draconis Prime." "And you, little healer?" "Sarah Chen," she replied, already pulling medical supplies from her pack. "And I'm about to do something that will probably get me kicked out of the Xenobiologist Union. I'm going to treat a patient I can't officially classify." Despite his pain, Thyraxton managed what might have been a smile. "Your species amuses me, Sarah Chen. What do you require?" For the next 6 hours, Sarah worked tirelessly to stabilize the dragon's condition. Her human medical equipment was woefully inadequate for treating a creature of his size, but she adapted with the kind of resourcefulness that had made humanity famous across the galaxy. She used mining lasers to cauterize wounds, repurposed atmospheric processors to create a breathable environment for his damaged lungs, and even jury-rigged a plasma welder to reset the bones in his wing. Throughout it all, Thyraxton watched her with growing amazement. Humans were known throughout the galaxy as a stubborn, adaptable species, but seeing one work so tirelessly for a creature she'd just met was something else entirely. Most species would have demanded payment, guarantees, or at least some assurance of safety. Sarah asked for nothing but the chance to help. "Why do your people call themselves humanity?" Thyraxton asked as Sarah carefully cleaned the energy burn on his flank. "It seems an odd choice for a species name." Sarah paused in her work, considering the question. "It comes from our word for compassion, for the quality that makes us care for others. We chose it because we believed that's what defined us, not our intelligence or our strength, but our ability to see suffering and feel compelled to ease it." "And do you feel compelled?" Sarah looked up at him, her hands still working to clean his wounds. "Every day. Sometimes it's inconvenient. Sometimes it's dangerous. And sometimes it would be easier to just walk away. But yes, I feel compelled. Right now, seeing you hurt, I can't imagine doing anything else but trying to help." Thyraxton was quiet for a long moment, processing this revelation. In his 1,000 years of life, he had encountered countless species across the galaxy. Some were brilliant. Some were powerful. Some were ancient beyond measure. But none had ever chosen their species name based on their capacity for kindness. "My people," he said slowly, "were known as the Star Dragons because we could travel between the stars on our own power, riding the solar winds across the void. We were mighty, feared, respected, but we were not kind. Perhaps that is why we are gone, and you continue to spread across the galaxy." Sarah finished cleaning his wounds and began applying synthesized biogel to promote healing. "What happened to your people, Thyraxton?" The dragon's eyes grew distant, reflecting pain that had nothing to do with his physical injuries. "War. Always war." The younger dragons grew hungry for conquest, while the elders counseled patience. "We turned on ourselves, fought amongst the stars until only I remained. I have wandered the galaxy for 3 centuries, searching for a purpose, for a people who might understand what we once were. And now you're here, on a mining colony on the edge of nowhere, being patched up by a human doctor who probably has no business treating mythological creatures," Sarah said with a small smile. "Mythological? Dragons are part of human folklore. Ancient stories about powerful, flying creatures who hoarded treasure and fought heroes. Most humans think they're just legends." "It's 7, Thyraxton considered this. "Perhaps your legends remember a time when my people visited your world. We were not always careful about remaining hidden." As Sarah worked, she began to understand the full extent of Thyraxton's loneliness. He was literally the last of his kind, carrying the weight of an entire extinct civilization. No wonder he had seemed so surprised by her offer of help. When you're the last of your species, trust becomes a luxury you can't afford. But humans, Sarah reflected, had a talent for befriending the unbefriendable. It was perhaps their greatest gift to the galaxy. The ability to look at any creature, no matter how strange or dangerous, and see not a threat but a potential friend. "There," she said finally, stepping back to admire her work. "You should be stable now, but you'll need to rest. No flying for at least a week, and I'll need to check those wounds daily." Thyraxton attempted to rise, testing his mobility. The pain had lessened considerably, and he could feel his body beginning to heal. But more importantly, he felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries. "Hope. You would return?" he asked. "Daily?" "Of course. You're my patient now, Thyraxton. I don't abandon my patients." As Sarah packed her equipment, preparing to return to the colony before she was missed, she had no idea that her simple act of compassion had just set in motion events that would reshape the balance of power in their sector of the galaxy. Thyraxton watched her go, something stirring in his ancient heart that he had thought long dead. The Star Dragons had been known for many things throughout their history. Their power, their pride, their terrible beauty. But above all, they had been known for one trait that had defined their species for millennia: absolute, unshakable loyalty to those who earned their trust. And Sarah Chen, without realizing it, had just earned the loyalty of the last star dragon in the galaxy. Sarah's daily visits to the crashed ship became the highlight of both their days. Each morning, she would make excuses to leave the colony: geological surveys, atmospheric readings, equipment maintenance, anything to justify her trips to the valley where Thyraxton's ship lay hidden. The other colonists were too busy with their mining operations to question the dedicated scientists' solo expeditions. During their time together, an unlikely friendship bloomed. Sarah learned that Thyraxton was not just the last of his species, but also their living library. Star dragons had perfect memory, and he carried within his mind the complete history of his people. Their art, their science, their philosophy. In return, Sarah shared stories of humanity's rise among the stars, their struggles and triumphs, their endless curiosity about the universe. "Your people are remarkable," Thyraxton said one afternoon as Sarah changed the dressings on his wing. His healing had progressed faster than she'd expected, though she suspected his alien physiology was responsible for that. "In all my travels, I have never encountered a species quite like humans." "How so?" Sarah asked, carefully checking the bone alignment in his wing joint. "Most species are defined by a single trait. The Zephyrians, by their logic. The Korthakari, by their strength. The Etherians, by their psychic abilities. But humans seem to excel at being adaptive. You take the best qualities from every species you encounter and make them your own." Sarah paused in her work. "You make us sound like copycats." "Not copycats," Thyraxton corrected gently. "Synthesizers. You take concepts and improve upon them. Your medicine combines techniques from a dozen worlds. Your technology merges principles that other species never thought to combine. Even your kindness. You showed compassion to me not because your culture demands it, but because you chose to." Over the weeks of treatment, Sarah began to notice changes in Thyraxton beyond just physical healing. The deep sadness that had shadowed his eyes when they first met was gradually being replaced by something brighter. He began sharing stories of his people's glory days, describing star dances performed across entire solar systems and the great libraries built within asteroid fields. But more concerning to Sarah were the reports filtering back from the colony's long-range sensors. Ships had been detected at the edge of the system, sleek, predatory vessels that belonged to the Hegemony Collective. The Collective was known throughout the galaxy for their policy of claiming and exploiting any world with valuable resources, regardless of existing settlements. "They'll be here within days," Sarah told Thyraxton during one of her visits. "The colony administrator is trying to negotiate, but the Collective doesn't usually listen to mining settlements." Thyraxton's expression darkened. "The Collective are slavers and thieves. They will take your people's work and claim your world for their own. What does your colony intend to do?" What can we do? We have maybe 50 people here, mostly miners and scientists. No weapons to speak of, just mining equipment and a few security guards. The Collective probably has hundreds of soldiers and warships." The dragon was quiet for a long moment, his great eyes reflecting an inner fire that Sarah had never seen before. "Tell me about these people," he said finally. "Your colonists, are they good people?" "They're just ordinary humans," Sarah replied. "They came here to build something new, to find resources that could help colonies throughout this sector. Most of them have families back on other worlds. They're not warriors, Thyraxton. They're just people trying to make an honest living. And you? What will you do when the Collective arrives?" Sarah met his gaze steadily. "I'll stay with my people. We'll face whatever comes together." That night, Thyraxton made a decision that would have consequences far beyond the small mining colony of Haven's Rest. For the first time in 300 years, he prepared for war. When Sarah arrived the next morning, she found Thyraxton standing at full height in a clearing near his ship. His injuries had healed completely. Something that should have taken months had happened overnight. His scales gleamed like polished metal, shifting through brilliant hues of gold and crimson as energy flowed through his body. Sarah, he said, his voice carrying a new authority that made her instinctively step back. I must ask something of you, though you may think it foolish. What is it? Would you trust me to protect your people? Sarah stared at him, not fully understanding the question. Of course, but Thyraxton, you're still recovering. And even if you weren't, the collective has entire fleets. One dragon, no matter how powerful, can't stand against. You do not understand, Thyraxton interrupted, his voice gentle but firm. You have never seen a star dragon at war. We were not called the Lords of the Void without reason. But I do not ask you to trust in my power, I ask you to trust in my gratitude. He lowered his great head until his eyes were level with hers. Sarah Chen, you saved my life when you had no reason to. You tended my wounds when others would have fled. You gave me hope when I had forgotten what it felt like. In return, I offer you something no human has ever received. The protection of the last star dragon. Before Sarah could respond, the colony's emergency sirens began wailing across the valley. The collective had arrived ahead of schedule. I have to get back, Sarah said, panic creeping into her voice. My people, go, Thyraxton said. But know this. Before the sun sets, your people will be safe. I give you my word as the last of my kind. Sarah ran back to the colony, her mind reeling with questions and fears. By the time she reached Haven's Rest, the collective ships were already descending through the atmosphere, massive dreadnoughts that blotted out the sky. Colony Administrator Mitchell was frantically trying to establish communication, hoping to negotiate some kind of arrangement that would save his people. Attention Haven's Rest colony, a cold voice echoed from the collective's lead ship. You are trespassing on collective territory. You have 1 hour to surrender all mining operations and prepare for relocation to labor facilities. Compliance is mandatory. The colonists gathered in the main square, families holding each other close as the alien ships cast shadows over their homes. Sarah found herself thinking of Thyraxton, wondering what he could possibly do against such overwhelming force. She got her answer 30 minutes later. A roar echoed across the sky, deeper and more powerful than any sound the colonists had ever heard. Every person in Haven's Rest looked up to see a sight that would be burned into their memories forever. Thyraxton rising from the valley like a living comet, his wings spread wide enough to eclipse the smaller collective vessels. But this was not the wounded, weary creature Sarah had been treating. This was a star dragon in his full glory. Scales blazing with internal fire, energy crackling between his claws like captured lightning. He moved through the sky with grace and power that made the collective's advanced ships look clumsy by comparison. Collective vessels, Thyraxton's voice boomed across all communication frequencies. You are intruding upon a world under my protection. You will depart immediately, or face the consequences. The response from the collective was predictable. Weapons fire. Dozens of energy beams lanced out from their ships. Enough firepower to level a city, but Thyraxton was no longer where their targeting systems said he should be. He moved like liquid light, flowing between the attacks with impossible speed and grace. What followed could barely be called a battle. It was more like a force of nature encountering a collection of toys. Thyraxton's breath weapon. A stream of plasma hot enough to melt through starship hulls like paper. Carved through the collective fleet with surgical precision. He disabled their weapons, shattered their engines, and left their ships dead in space without killing a single crew member. The largest dreadnought tried to ram him, its captain desperate to bring down the dragon through sheer mass. Thyraxton caught the ship in his claws, held it steady for a moment that seemed to last forever, then gently set it down in the valley far from the colony. You have seen what happens to those who threaten my protected ones, Thyraxton announced to the remaining ships. Depart now, and carry word to your superiors. This world and its people are under the guardianship of Thyraxton of the Eternal Flame. Any who would harm them will answer to me. The surviving collective ships fled the system without another word, leaving behind wreckage and a colony full of humans who couldn't quite believe what they'd witnessed. When Thyraxton landed in the colony square, the settlers kept their distance, awed and somewhat afraid of the magnificent creature who had saved them, all except Sarah, who walked straight up to him with her medical scanner in hand. "Are you hurt?" she asked, professionally checking him for injuries despite the fact that he'd just destroyed an entire fleet. "Some of those energy blasts looked like they might have grazed you." Thyraxton stared down at her, amazement evident in his ancient eyes. She had just watched him demolish the most feared military force in this sector of the galaxy, and her first concern was whether he needed medical attention. "I am unharmed," he said softly. "But Sarah, do you understand what has just happened?" "You protected my people," Sarah replied simply. "Just like you promised. It is more than that." Thyraxton's voice carried weight that seemed to echo across dimensions. "By defending this colony, I have declared it under my protection. In the old ways of my people, this means more than simply keeping you safe from enemies. It means your people and I are now bound together. Your fate and mine are intertwined." Sarah looked around at her fellow colonists, miners and scientists and engineers who had come to this world, seeking nothing more than honest work and a chance to build something new. Now they were under the protection of the last star dragon in the galaxy, a creature whose very existence would reshape the political landscape of their entire sector. "What does that mean, exactly?" she asked. Thyraxton's expression was solemn, but there was warmth in his eyes as he looked down at the small human woman who had changed everything. "It means that as long as any of you live, you will never face danger alone. But more than that, it means I am no longer the last of my kind. I have found my new people." As the suns of Kepler 442b set that evening, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold, Sarah realized that her simple decision to help an injured creature had just altered the course of galactic history. The collective would spread word of what had happened here, and soon every power in known space would know that humanity had somehow earned the loyalty of a star dragon. But standing there in the colony square, surrounded by grateful people and watched over by a creature of living legend, Sarah found she wasn't worried about the future. She had learned something about dragons that the old stories had never mentioned. Their loyalty, once given, was absolute and eternal. And Thyraxton, for his part, had learned something about humans that would stay with him for the rest of his very long life. Sometimes the greatest power in the universe is simply the willingness to help someone in need, no matter how strange or dangerous they might appear. The bond between them had been forged in compassion and sealed in battle. Now, it would be tested by something far more challenging than enemy fleets or galactic politics. It would be tested by the complexities of two very different species learning to live as family. 6 months after the collective's defeat, Haven's Rest had transformed from a simple mining colony into something unprecedented in galactic history. The first world jointly governed by humans and a star dragon. The change brought challenges no one could have anticipated, but also opportunities that stretched far beyond what anyone had dreamed possible. Thyraxton had kept his promise of protection, but his presence brought complications Sarah hadn't expected. Diplomatic vessels arrived weekly, representatives from dozens of species seeking audience with the last star dragon. Trade agreements that had taken years to negotiate were suddenly fast-tracked when word spread that humanity had a dragon ally. The Galactic Council itself had sent envoys, eager to understand how a mining colony had achieved what galactic superpowers had failed to do for centuries. "This is getting ridiculous," Colony Administrator Mitchell told Sarah as they watched another delegation ship land in what had once been their simple spaceport. "That's the third Zephyrian diplomatic vessel this week. They're offering us exclusive mining rights to asteroid belts we've never even heard of." Sarah nodded, feeling overwhelmed by the sudden attention. "Thyraxton says it's because dragons were legendary even when his people were alive. Having one as an ally gives us status we never asked for. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching." But the political changes were nothing compared to the personal transformation in Thyraxton himself. The lonely, wounded creature Sarah had found in the crashed ship was gone, replaced by someone who seemed to grow more vibrant with each passing day. He had purpose again, people to protect, a reason to hope for the future. He had also become fiercely protective of the colonists in ways that were both touching and occasionally problematic. When a merchant tried to overcharge the colony for medical supplies, Thyraxton personally visited the trader's ship to discuss fair pricing. The merchant not only lowered his prices but threw in several crates of supplies for free, When a group of pirates attempted to raid the system's outer shipping lanes, they found themselves facing a dragon who had grown tired of their interference with his people's commerce. "You've spoiled him," Sarah teased Thyrexton one evening as they sat together on the observation deck he'd built into his ship. The vessel had become a permanent fixture in the valley, transformed from a crash site into something resembling a cross between a home and a fortress. "Spoiled?" Thyraxton rumbled, genuinely confused. "How so? You've gotten used to being appreciated. 6 months ago, you thought you were alone in the universe. Now you have an entire colony that considers you family. Delegates lining up to meet with you. And merchants competing to offer you the best prices. You've gone from hermit to celebrity." Thyraxton considered this. His great head tilted in thought. "It is strange," he admitted. "For so long, I believed my purpose died with my people. I wandered the galaxy seeking meaning and finding only empty space. But here, with your kind, I have discovered something my people never taught me." "What's that?" "That family is not about blood or species. It is about choice. Your people chose to accept me, and I chose to protect them. That choice creates bonds stronger than any genetic inheritance." Sarah smiled, but her expression grew serious as she looked out at the bustling colony below. "Thyraxton, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. Always. Are you happy here? Really happy? Because what we have now, it's not just about protecting us anymore. You've become part of our community, our family, but I know you could leave any time you wanted. You could explore the galaxy, find adventures we couldn't even imagine. Are you sure this is what you want?" Thyraxton was quiet for a long moment, watching the lights of the colony twinkle in the gathering darkness. When he spoke, his voice carried absolute certainty. "Sarah, do you remember the first thing you said to me when you found me injured in my ship?" "I said hello, and that I was there to help. Before that, the very first thing." Sarah thought back to that day, trying to remember. Then it came to her, and she felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. "I said hello, in a whisper because I was terrified." "No," Thyraxton said gently. "The very first thing you did was activate your recording device and say, 'I'm going in.' You made the choice to enter an unknown alien vessel to help someone you'd never met, despite having no idea whether I was dangerous or friendly. That choice, that moment of decision, is when my new life began." He turned to look at her directly, his ancient eyes reflecting the colony lights like captured stars. "Every day since then has been a gift I never expected to receive. I am not staying here out of duty or gratitude, though both are real. I am here because this is where I choose to be, with the people I choose to call family." Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from the colony's defense center. A massive ship had just dropped out of hyperspace at the system's edge. But this wasn't a diplomatic vessel or merchant trader. The energy signatures were unlike anything in their databases, and the ship was heading directly for Kepler 442b. Within minutes, Thyraxton was airborne, Sarah riding in a specially designed harness between his shoulders. They had practiced this maneuver dozens of times, Sarah serving as his link to human communication systems while he provided mobility and firepower. What they saw when they reached orbit made them both catch their breath. The ship was enormous, easily 3 times the size of a collective dreadnought, but its design was elegant rather than militaristic. Organic curves flowed along its hull, and energy patterns pulsed through what looked like metallic veins. Most shocking of all, the ship was responding to their approach by shifting its hull color in complex patterns. "That's not random," Sarah said, studying the patterns through her scanner. "Those color changes, they're following a mathematical sequence. It's trying to communicate." Thyraxton studied the ship with growing excitement. "Sarah, I know this vessel. It is ancient. From the time before the Great Wars. This is an ark ship of the Eternal Wanderers." "Who are the Eternal Wanderers?" "A species old beyond measure, possibly older than my own people. They travel the galaxy in great ships like this one, observing and learning but rarely interfering. For one to come here." Thyraxton's voice trailed off as the implications sank in. The massive ship broadcast a message on all frequencies. But instead of words, it sent a series of mathematical concepts directly into their minds. Equations describing stellar formation, the physics of hyperspace travel, and finally, a simple greeting in the universal language of mathematics. When Thyraxton responded, using his own mental capabilities to broadcast mathematical concepts back to the ship, the response was immediate and overwhelming. Images flooded their consciousness, star maps showing the locations of other species who had bonded with unlikely allies, historical records of interspecies cooperation dating back millions of years, and finally, a concept that made both Sarah and Thyraxton gasp in wonder. The Eternal Wanderers had been watching. Not just them, but countless species across the galaxy who had formed bonds across the barriers of biology and culture. The relationship between Sarah and Thyraxton, between humanity and the last star dragon, was not unique. It was part of a pattern that stretched across the galaxy and throughout time. "They're offering us something," Sarah whispered, her mind still reeling from the information download. Not just knowledge, but membership. In some kind of alliance of species who have learned to work together despite their differences. The massive ship transmitted one final concept, an invitation to join a network of worlds where different species had learned to thrive together, where diversity was seen as strength rather than division. But the choice, they made clear, was entirely up to Sarah and Thyraxton and their people. Over the following weeks, as representatives from the Eternal Wanderers shared their knowledge with the colony, Sarah began to understand the true scope of what they were being offered. The network included species from every corner of the galaxy, warriors who had learned to farm, scholars who had become explorers, entirely artificial intelligences who had found kinship with organic life. "What do you think?" Sarah asked Thyraxton as they stood together in the colony square, watching human children play with holographic projections created by Wanderer technology. "It's a chance to be part of something bigger than we ever imagined." "I think," Thyraxton replied, "that 6 months ago, I was the loneliest being in the galaxy. Today, I am surrounded by family, friends, and now the possibility of joining a community that spans the stars. The universe has a sense of irony that my people never appreciated." "Is that a yes?" Thyraxton smiled, an expression that had become much more common since his arrival at Haven's Rest. "Sarah, you taught me that the most important decisions are often the simplest ones. When you found me injured and alone, you didn't debate the political implications or consider the long-term consequences. You simply decided to help. Now, when faced with the opportunity to help others find the same bonds we have discovered, the choice is equally simple." The ceremony of acceptance took place under the twin suns of Kepler 442b, with representatives from dozens of species gathering to welcome the newest members to the alliance. But for Sarah, the most meaningful moment came when Thyraxton formally introduced her to the assembled dignitaries. "This is Dr. Sarah Chen," he announced, his voice carrying across the gathering with ceremonial weight. "She is the human who saved my life, the friend who gave me hope, and the family member who taught me that love transcends species. It is my honor to present her as my bond sister, partner in the alliance between humanity and the Star Dragon legacy." As applause echoed across the ceremony grounds, Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. She had set out to be a xenobiologist, studying alien life from a professional distance. Instead, she had become something unprecedented in galactic history, the bond sister of the last star dragon, co-founder of a new type of interspecies alliance. That night, as celebration continued throughout the colony, Sarah and Thyraxton retreated to their favorite spot on his ship's observation deck. The galaxy stretched out before them, no longer a vast emptiness but a community of countless worlds where different species had learned to call each other family. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't found you that day?" Sarah asked. Thyraxton considered the question seriously. "I believe the universe has patterns we do not fully understand. Perhaps if you had not found me, someone else would have. Perhaps my ship would have crashed on a different world, or at a different time. But I prefer to believe that some things are meant to be." "Meant to be?" "You chose to help a stranger in need. I chose to protect those who had shown me kindness. Together, We chose to build something new. Those choices created ripples that have spread across the galaxy. I think that pattern, compassion leading to loyalty, loyalty leading to family, family leading to hope, is one of the fundamental forces that shapes the universe. Sarah leaned against Thyraxton's warm scales, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing. Around them, the stars shone with new meaning. Each point of light potentially held worlds where other unlikely families had formed, where species had learned to see past their differences to find common ground. "So what happens now?" she asked. "Now," Thyraxton said with quiet satisfaction, "we help others find what we have found. We show the galaxy that family is not limited by biology, that strength comes from unity rather than conquest, and that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe is simply the willingness to help someone in need." As if summoned by his words, a shooting star blazed across the sky above them. Another ship entering the system, perhaps carrying diplomats or traders or explorers seeking to understand the miraculous alliance between humanity and dragons. Sarah no longer felt overwhelmed by the attention. Instead, she felt excited by the possibilities. Each new arrival was a chance to share what they had learned, to help others discover that the barriers between species were often smaller than they appeared. Each conversation was an opportunity to plant seeds that might grow into new alliances, new families, new hope for a galaxy that had too often seen difference as grounds for conflict. "You know what the strangest part is?" Sarah said as they watched the approaching ship's lights grow brighter. "I came here to study alien life, and I ended up discovering something about human nature I never expected." "What's that?" "That our greatest strength isn't our technology or our adaptability or our stubbornness. It's our ability to look at any creature in the universe and ask ourselves, how can I help, even when that creature is a 40-foot dragon from a species that shouldn't exist?" Thyraxton's rumbling laugh echoed across the valley, a sound of pure joy that had become the unofficial anthem of Haven's Rest. "And I learned that family is not something you are born into, but something you choose to build. Every day, with every decision to care for someone other than yourself." As the new ship began its descent toward the colony, Sarah and Thyraxton rose to greet whatever challenges and opportunities it might bring. They moved together with the easy coordination of partners who had faced the impossible and made it look routine, ready to welcome new friends to their ever-growing family. Above them, the stars continued their ancient dance, bearing witness to a truth that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come, that sometimes the most extraordinary adventures begin with the simplest acts of kindness, and that love, once offered freely, has the power to transform not just individuals but entire civilizations. The last star dragon was no longer alone, and humanity had gained an ally whose loyalty would span the ages. But more than that, they had proven to themselves and to the galaxy that the bonds between thinking beings could transcend any barrier, biological, cultural, or temporal. In the end, Sarah's decision to help an injured dragon had done more than save a single life. It had saved the concept of hope itself, proving that in a universe often divided by fear and misunderstanding, compassion remained the most powerful force of all.